Hello everybody, James here, and I'm sure you all know by now that wrestling performer, valet, manager Tamara Lynn Sytch, aka Tammy Sytch, aka Sonny, aka Tammy Fitch, if you're a Smoky Mountain fan, has been in prison for killing a 75-year-old man, and the sentence has been carried out. Now we're going to examine the crime and exactly why she deserved such a large sentence, including look at her defence and her own plea to the judge for a sentence reduction, or indeed a far cushier stay in a mental health facility where she would not serve a single day longer in prison. Now, forgive me because my eyes are going to be darting back and forth. I've not got an auto cue or anything. But very briefly, the accident itself. So Tammy Sytch, while almost 4 times the legal blood alcohol limits of Florida, she was breathalyzed, keep in mind, an hour after the accident, and without a valid driver's license, was driving a sedan in March 2022 at a high rate of speed, with other cars having to take evasive action before she crashed into a vehicle that was being driven by Mr. Julian Lasseter, 75, of Daytona Beach, and he had stopped at a red light near Ormond Beach in Florida. Lasseter's car then hit the car in front of his, causing minor injuries to the driver and 3 passengers of that third car. There were open bottles of vodka in Tammy's car, as well as cannabis and THC in her system, and her excuse for getting behind the wheel? Well, she needed to nip down to the shops for some tacos. As an aside, the night before Sytch was arrested for that, she was found intoxicated outside a bar and required to be taken to hospital. Sytch was arrested on May 6, 2022, and then bonded out on $225,500 several days later, but then she was reincarcerated on May 13th after bail was revoked. And it's amazing that she wasn't remanded straight away, considering her history of DUIs and, injuring people beforehand. But Tammy was actually at large for nearly 2 months before the judge actually revoked her bail, because the actual accident was back in March. Now, the WWE Hall of Fame pleaded no contest in August 2023 to driving under the influence and causing death, along with 7 other DUI-related charges, according to Volusia County, Florida. Then this past Monday, a judge sentenced Sytch to the following.
I'm going to adjudicate the defendant guilty, sentence her to 10.6625 years in the Department of Corrections. Her credit is 566 days, so with credit for the 566 days. On count 1, the DUI manslaughter, second-degree felony, I'm going to adjudicate you guilty. I'm going to sentence you consecutively to 7 years in the Department of Corrections to be served after the 10.6625.
Yes, 17 years and 6 months in state prison. After her release, she will serve an additional 8 years of probation, including substance abuse and alcohol education orders, a $10,000 fine, a whole 50 hours of community service, and her driving license will be permanently revoked. She will actually serve a little under 16 years, with credit being given to time served already since her bail was revoked back in May 2022. She has also faced a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Lasseter's estate. However, the estate withdrew its suit in September after Sytch pleaded no contest. The complaint was dismissed with prejudice, which means it cannot be refiled. Not that she has any money anyway. But the fact is that if she had pleaded guilty, then the Lasseter estate could have sued her. So this was just yet another nolo contendere kind of get-out clause by not quite admitting defeat but not contesting the charges. The defendant's history of drinking and driving is horrendous. She was death on wheels, says Florida State Attorney R.J. Lareza. I'm hoping I'm going to blow that name, I know. In a statement shared Monday, it was only a matter of time before her drunk driving killed an innocent and unsuspecting individual. So why did she deserve such a high prison sentence? Well, 17 and a half years is a huge chunk of time, especially considering that she won't be eligible for parole until she has served at least 85% of her total sentence. It could have been worse, though, because prosecutors actually requested Tammy serve the maximum allowed, which is 26 years, so she received 8.5 years less than what she could have. We will get to her prior history of offending later, but let's look at 2 things from the trial. First off is the expert witness's testimony, who they brought in to testify on Tammy's behalf. Now, the video is too long to show on here, but to wrap it all up quickly, Tammy suffers from PTSD and probable CTE from all those concussions she received in the wrestling business, and back injuries, somehow that matters, and symptoms of bipolar disorder and various dissociative episodes, most likely from being drunk and high, and of course, borderline personality disorder. How could we forget that one? But the problem is that the medical examiner spent a grand total of 90 minutes with Tammy. And by 19 minutes with Tammy, I mean 19 minutes reading the medical questionnaire that Tammy herself filled in, full of all her self-reported ailments. When the prosecutor then asked for MRIs and brain scans to prove a history of Tammy's physical issues, who, keep in mind, aside from a few matches, all the matches that she had were like valet pull-apart matches that she never really wrestled, essentially. None of her physical ailments or concussions could be proved. Then there's Tammy's speech at the end to the judge. I've heard more than once that Tammy exhibits signs of sociopathy. One trait with sociopaths is that they are very self-obsessed and they see life through their own lens and lack empathy for anybody else. Tammy's statement was focused mostly on herself, of course. Her woe is me life, how everything is everybody else's fault, and most laughably of all, that somehow Chris Candido is to blame for her downward spiral by not only getting her out of medical school to get into wrestling, but then subsequently and selfishly dying in 2005. Boy, those beautiful white women sure have it more difficult than I realised. Also, and I'm sure anybody who has any decent knowledge of professional wrestling and of Tammy's story herself, Tammy claiming that her life went off the rails in 2005 is a laughably moronic claim, especially considering she was a bona fide drug addict in the late 90s, from the late 90s, allegedly trading favours for Somas. Hell, she was fired from the WWF in 1998 over her drug issues. Then when she went to ECW, she was suspended for drug issues. And keep in mind, this is ECW we're talking about. And then she even went on ECW TV and cut a promo. She did a backstage vignette talking about the drug issues she was suffering with and how she was going to turn her life around, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yes, and then she was fired by WCW because of, I forget. But, you know, maybe you should guess on that one. Dutch Mantel also talks about how awful a shape Tammy and sadly Chris Candido were in when they worked for Dutch in Puerto Rico back in the early 2000s. The difference between Tammy and Chris is that Chris worked his way out of his demons and got back into great shape and was making headway back into the business he loved since he was a child before he tragically died after a freak leg break in 2005. And also, let's not forget medical school. Nobody pulled Tammy out of school except for Tammy. And there was nothing stopping her from going back to train to be a doctor except for her. Tammy certainly has a habit of blaming others or outside circumstances beyond her control instead of taking responsibility. So after the accident with Julian Lasseter, but prior to her arrest, Sytch publicly disavowed responsibility in the traffic incident that caused the death of the 75-year-old man. A fan asked her, how fast were you going when you slammed into the poor old guy stopping at a traffic light and killed him? His life ended for what reason? Were you on your way to a fire? Or drunk? Or high? Sytch responded, about 10 miles per hour since I was slowing down to a light, but he had a heart attack. Nothing to do with my seizure. So apparently she had a seizure as well. Who knew? After being arrested in Florida, Sytch took to her Facebook account writing, if anyone says anything negative about me, you'll be blocked and never unblocked. You don't know the real story, so don't act like you're some effing journalist, I'm not swearing here, when all you do is type from your mum's basement. Done. Well, that's a fate worse than death, isn't it? Getting blocked by Tammy Sytch on her Facebook. Jesus wept. Anyway, the biggest undoing, aside from Tammy's appalling lack of sympathy for the victim, is, of course, Ms. Sytch's prior record, something that came up time and time again during court proceedings. It was also noted in the court that of all the DUI incidents in question in Tammy's history, the severity of these incidents seemed to escalate over time. So here is a decent list of Sytch's prior record, and thank you very much to Mike Johnson of PW Insider for publishing a detailed timeline of which this is from. Sytch had been previously arrested on the 13th of January 2022 for allegedly threatening to kill an intimate partner while raising a pair of scissors in the air towards the victim during a domestic dispute. She was released from Monmouth County Correctional on 14th of January 2022 after a hearing where she was ordered to have weekly check-ins with court and that she not possess any weapons. At this point, we don't know if she could actually still stand trial for that incident. In December 2021 in Florida, where Sytch was on vacation to celebrate her 49th birthday, officers had several contacts with her, the first being a call related to an alleged domestic violence incident and the second being a check-in to her well-being. And now, here are the DUIs. Sytch's legal issues in Pennsylvania, 4 different arrests between 2015 and 2016. I will speed through these. 30th of May 2015, I won't give all the dates, you can just read them. Sytch was stopping by Mahoning Township PA police after being seen driving erratically into a Walmart parking lot. 1st of June, Sytch was pulled over after a car crossed the solid centre yellow line several times and entered oncoming traffic in Layton, Pennsylvania. On the 20th of June 2015, Sytch crashed her car into a ditch in Towmensing Township at 10:40 p.m, claiming to the responding authorities that her GPS had told her to make a sudden turn into a ditch, apparently, which caused her to turn wide and end up in the ditch. Officer requested Sytch take a field sobriety test, but she claimed to be in too much pain due to her recently blacking out and falling down the steps. Drunk, I imagine. Then on 18th of August 2016, a judge sentenced Sytch to 97 days in prison, giving her credit for 95 days spent in rehab. The final 60 days were paid by WWE, who had reversed a previous stance that cut her off from assistance via their wellness policy program. After Sytch criticised the choice of rehab facilities WWE had chosen to send her on their dime, keep in mind, on a DVD interview, which was kayfabe commentaries, I believe. Sytch would spend her sentence in rehab and given 5 years probation plus fines community service. Just 18 days into that 5-year probationary period, Sytch was arrested in Northampton County, Pennsylvania. In that case, she pled guilty to driving without a license, driving an unregistered vehicle, operating a vehicle without required financial responsibility, no insurance, displaying incorrect plate card, and operating a vehicle without valid inspection, blah, 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 just a million of them. Sytch was then rushed from her then home in Palmerton, Pennsylvania, to the hospital. In December 2016, that day she was charged with possession of alcohol as well as being under the influence of alcohol, both which violated her zero-tolerance policy to her probation. Sytch then announced via social media she'd been released from hospital, and then 3 days later, Sytch was once again transported to hospital after authorities were called to her home, once again under the influence of alcohol, zero-tolerance policy of her probation, etc. You know how it was. But this time she was actually incarcerated for 5 months. Just a little over 6 months later, Sytch's parole was then revoked. Sytch was then residing in New Jersey, where the arrest continued. Sytch was charged with DUI on 23rd of January 2018. She was later charged with DUI and leaving the scene of an accident following yet another bloody arrest. And then Sytch was transported to a correctional facility and then remained there for 9 months. Sytch returned to New Jersey, but then just a few months later was arrested again. Sytch was pulled over 6:30 p.m. on 23rd of February 2019. And then she was incarcerated until she was transferred back to Pennsylvania 20th of March 2019. Then her parole was revoked yet again for missing a mandatory drugs test. Then on the 13th of July 2020, she was charged once again operating a motor vehicle during a second license suspension while she was in New Jersey. And here this was most interesting as well, and we're going backwards in time again. From a period between 2012 and 2013, she was arrested 5 times over the span of a month, after she violated an order of protection taken out by a former boyfriend in Connecticut on 3 separate occasions. Sytch was also charged with disorderly conduct, third-degree burglary, and 3 counts of violating a protective order. In that case, Sytch served 114 days in jail before being released, at which point she moved to Pennsylvania. It's once again worth reiterating this quote. The defendant's history of drinking and driving is horrendous. She was death on wheels. It was only a matter of time before her drunk driving killed an innocent and unsuspecting individual. So if you thought that Tammy Sytch's sentence of 17.5 years was too harsh, then I don't know what planet you're orbiting, but it certainly isn't the one that I live on. If you thought that Tammy's sentence was too lenient and she deserved maybe the 26 years max, then now you're talking my language. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to WSI, and we also have Tully Blanchard coming up and Greg the Hammer Valentine coming up in the month of December, as well as some compilation videos as well. So I will see you there soon. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you again for the next video.